hey, Coach, how you doing? Or, hey, Coach, how's recruiting coming? Or, hey, Coach, my son thinks you're the greatest. Or,
hey, Coach, someone just let the air out of your tires.
What?
Remember when a sitcom about a college football coach quietly lasted 9 seasons, while flashier shows around it disappeared? Premiering on ABC in 1989, Coach followed Hayden Fox, played by Craig T. Nelson, the intense, stubborn, and occasionally lovable head coach of the fictional Minnesota State Screaming Eagles. Keeping him company were his anxious assistant Luther Van Dam, played by Jerry Van Dyke, the big-hearted and gloriously not always brilliant Dauber, played by Bill Fagerbakke, and Christine Armstrong, played by Shelley Fabares, who spent most of the series keeping Hayden's world from sliding completely off the rails. 9 seasons, 197 episodes, locker room meltdowns, recruiting disasters, and some of the most underrated sitcom chemistry of the entire decade. Stick around for fact number 1, because in 2015, Coach actually came back, filmed a pilot, and then vanished before almost anyone saw it. But before we get started, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps YouTube show this to more retro TV fans just like you. All right, let's take it to the field. Number 15, Hayden Fox argued with his real-life son. In the later seasons of Coach, Hayden and Christine pursue one of the show's most emotionally loaded storylines, adopting a baby named Timothy. The process hits a serious wall when the child's biological father reappears and complicates everything. That biological father, Kevin, was played by Craig T. Nelson's real-life son, Noah Nelson. Let that land for a second. The scenes where Hayden Fox makes his case to the young man standing between him and fatherhood, that was an actual father and son going at it on a soundstage in front of a live studio audience. I mean, the emotional weight that those scenes carried, that's got a pretty legitimate source. Noah appeared in 2 key 1996 episodes, Her Boyfriend's Back and Somebody's Baby, anchoring the emotional back and forth over whether the adoption would go through at all.
I need to talk to you, Julie.
Well, there's nothing for us to talk about. You had your chance to be a part of all this, and you just walked out.
It wasn't even his first time on the show. Noah had already made smaller appearances earlier in the series, once as a delivery boy and once as a Minnesota State football player. Background roles, easy stuff. Then, the writers handed him a storyline opposite his father and put real stakes on the table. Number 14, the Dick Van Dyke cameo you probably missed. In the 1993 Christmas episode, Christmas of the Van Damned, Luther's chaotic family descends on the holiday party, their loud, eccentric relatives cycling in and out of scenes like a revolving door of dysfunction.
Hey, Ruth. This is your family. Yeah. They look like nice people.
And tucked into that chaos, completely unannounced, is Dick Van Dyke. The comedy legend appears briefly in the background as one of Luther's distant relatives. No introduction. He simply walks across the room like any other extra at the party and just keeps moving. The whole thing was a quiet favor to his younger brother Jerry, who played Luther Van Dam. The show didn't make a production of it, and the episode didn't pause to acknowledge it. You blink, and you're already past it. The moment lands right after Luther jokes about not resembling anyone else in his family. And then, one of the most recognizable faces in TV history casually drifts through the background like he's grabbing a drink and then heading to the buffet. Jerry Van Dyke, for his part, handled the whole thing with characteristic humility. He later joked in an interview that, quote, "I'm getting sick of Dick riding on my coattails. I couldn't prop up his career forever." And of course, one of TV's biggest legends, zero fanfare, and total background extra energy. Number 13, Dauber became Patrick Star. For 9 seasons, Bill Fagerbakke played Michael Dauber Dubinsky, the big, good-hearted assistant coach whose enthusiasm consistently outpaced his common sense. He was lovable, loyal, and reliably confused.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
My knees are never where I think they are.
Hey, Dob, how you doing?
Doing pretty good, Nick.
The kind of guy you'd run through a wall for, even if he wasn't entirely sure which wall. Then, Coach ended, and Fagerbakke landed another role, a very pink one. When SpongeBob SquarePants premiered in 1999, Fagerbakke became the voice of Patrick Star, the rock-dwelling, blissfully dim best friend of SpongeBob and the undisputed king of not knowing what's going on at any given moment. Fagerbakke himself made the connection pretty quickly. In interviews, he admitted that he referred to Patrick during the early years of the show as Aqua Dauber. And that's pretty hard to argue with that assessment.
Well, I like to think of Patrick as the friend every 7-year-old wants. And there's something kind of universal and broad about that.
Both characters are enormous, endearing, just perpetually baffled, and permanently positioned next to someone smarter who quietly carries the weight of every situation. The resume, it basically wrote itself. Coach fans knew Fagerbakke as the loyal sideman on the sidelines. An entirely new generation grew up hearing that same voice drifting up from under a rock in Bikini Bottom. Dauber never really went away. He just traded the football field for the ocean floor. Number 12, Christine was once a 60s pop star. Shelley Fabares spent years on Coach playing Christine Armstrong, the sharp, composed news anchor who somehow kept Hayden Fox from completely unraveling on a weekly basis.
Well, I just didn't want you to think it was you this morning.
Oh, honey, I never think it's me.
Patient, grounded, the adult in virtually every room she walked into. Most viewers had no idea that they were watching a former teen pop sensation. Before Coach, before Christine, before any of that, Fabray was topping the charts. Her 1962 single, Johnny Angel, climbed all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and camped there for 2 weeks.
I get carried away, I dream of him and me, and how it's gonna be.
Over 1 million copies sold. Gold record, the whole thing. The song debuted on The Donna Reed Show, where Fabray played teenage daughter Mary Stone. It blew up almost immediately, transforming a sitcom actress barely out of her teens into a full-blown national music phenomenon. Hollywood noticed. Fabray went on to star opposite of Elvis Presley in 3 films, Girl Happy, Spin Out, and Clambake. Being cast opposite of the biggest star in the world 3 different times, well, that tells you exactly where her own star power stood. Then, decades later, she quietly walked onto Coach as Hayden's love interest, and most of the audience just saw a sensible news anchor keeping a football coach in line. The woman had a number 1 hit and 3 Elvis movies on her resume. Hayden Fox, he had no idea how out of his league he actually was. Number 11, a real football legend stole Hayden's recruit. In the season 7 episode, The Kicker, Hayden Fox travels overseas on a recruiting trip to sign a phenomenal place kicker. Classic college football strategy. Find the hidden talent, get there first, and then bring him home to Minnesota State.
My name is Coach Hayden Fox of the Minnesota State Screaming Eagles, and these are my assistants.
Hayden got there first, but Lou Holtz got there faster. The late, great Lou Holtz, legendary Notre Dame head coach and future Hall of Famer, shows up in the episode playing himself. And in true ruthless recruiting fashion, he'd already closed the deal. The kicker was signed, he was Notre Dame bound. Better luck next time, Hayden. What made this moment land especially hard was the timing. This wasn't some retired coach doing a nostalgia cameo.
Welcome to our family, son. We're glad to have you. No. Sorry, pal, but we really need a kicker.
In 1995, when the episode aired, Holtz was actively on the Notre Dame sideline, winning games on national television every weekend. For football fans watching at home, the whole thing felt uncomfortably plausible. Holtz wasn't the only real name to walk through the Coach universe either. Over the course of the series, the show pulled in Mike Ditka, Troy Aikman, Barry Switzer, Jimmy Johnson, and George Allen. A guest list that read less like a sitcom casting sheet and more like a college football Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Number 10, the show almost got benched after year 1. Coach did not arrive as a hit. The ratings in the first series were shaky, critics were lukewarm, and ABC was doing the kind of quiet internal math that usually ends with a cancellation memo. The show was a bubble series.
Excuse me, Coach. Mail just came.
Yeah, just put it on the desk, will you?
It's all divided. Ticket requests, speaking requests, questions from alumni, and
Industry shorthand for start updating your resume. The early episodes leaned heavily on Hayden navigating life with his daughter alongside coaching duties at Minnesota State. The pieces were there, the chemistry wasn't quite landing. Then, the writers made a decision that changed everything. They leaned into Luther and Dauber. Suddenly, Coach stopped feeling like a family sitcom with football in the background and started clicking as a workplace comedy. The trio of Hayden, Luther, and Dauber found a rhythm, and the audience found the show. The better chemistry helped.
Well, she wants something from me, otherwise why's she coming here?
What did she say in the letter?
Well, she said some cockamamie thing about us having a great dance and music department. Maybe we do.
But the show still needed a bigger stage to play on. ABC gave them one by moving Coach to Tuesday nights directly behind Roseanne. At the time, the number 1 show on television. That lead-in dropped millions of new viewers straight into Hayden's lap, and the ratings responded accordingly. By season 2, Coach was a top 20 hit. The show that nearly got pulled after 1 season ended up lasting longer than most sitcoms of its day. All because the writers figured out that Hayden Fox was only as good as the chaos standing next to him. Number 9, the audition Craig T. Nelson thought he blew. Craig T. Nelson walked into his Coach audition already irritated that he had to be there. Creator Barry Kemp wanted him for Hayden Fox, but ABC needed convincing, which meant Nelson had to sit in a room full of network executives and then perform on command.
Excuse me. Could you tell Christine Armstrong that Hayden Fox is downstairs waiting for her?
Sure. Knock him dead on Saturday, Coach.
He was not happy about it. According to Kemp, Nelson's frustration came through loud and clear. Instead of charming the room, he gave a performance that landed with a thud, and then walked out convinced that he torched his own chances. ABC's reaction confirmed it. The executives were not impressed, and the general consensus was that Nelson was not their guy. Kemp spent the next week or two looking at other actors anyway, but nobody fit. He went back to ABC and told them that Craig T. Nelson was still the only person who could play Hayden Fox.
I haven't been very responsible as a coach.
What do you mean?
Well, I was in there talking to Christine, and she's got to cover this story about the terrible accident on the highway, and
The network pushed back hard, reportedly warning Kemp that the show would never see the light of day if he insisted on that casting. But Kemp insisted anyway, and the next day, ABC offered Nelson the part. 9 seasons. An Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series in 1992. One of the most recognizable coaches in television history. And all of it built on an audition that the man walked out of certain that he'd already lost. Number 8. Hayden and Luther didn't click right away. On screen, Hayden Fox and Luther Van Dam looked like a natural comedy duo. The intense, no-nonsense coach perpetually saddled with the nervous but well-meaning assistant who somehow made every situation slightly worse.
First time I ever saw her, I remember Beth brought her down to the locker room at halftime that Louisville game. She couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. God, we played lousy that day.
Easy chemistry, effortless timing, but behind the scenes, Craig T. Nelson and Jerry Van Dyke were still figuring each other out. The friction came down to 2 completely opposite approaches to the same job. Nelson was disciplined and precise, a trained actor who came to rehearsal prepared and liked to work through scenes methodically. Van Dyke came from stand-up and burlesque, where structure was kind of optional and spontaneity was the whole point. Nelson wanted to rehearse. Van Dyke wanted to jump in and see what happened. Early on, that gap created some tension. Then, Nelson noticed something. Van Dyke's unpredictable, loose energy was genuinely difficult to anticipate, and Hayden Fox's constant exasperation with Luther was landing harder because of it. The frustration that Nelson was playing on screen had a real source standing right next to him, so he stopped fighting it and started using it. Van Dyke stayed loose, Nelson stayed precise, and the contrast that initially created friction became the engine that drove their entire dynamic.
I'll go with Kelly, Christine.
oh, got a problem. How the Buckeyes look?
You got 2 problems.
Nelson later described the partnership as lightning in a bottle. 2 actors who didn't immediately click, accidentally building one of the show's best relationships by refusing to work the same way. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this trip back to Minnesota State, hit that like button and subscribe. And in the comments, let us know your favorite Coach episode. We dig up the weird, forgotten, and genuinely strange stories from the TV shows that you grew up watching. And Coach still has a few surprises left. All right, halftime's over. Back to the sideline. Number 7, the Iowa DNA behind Minnesota State. Coach was set in Minnesota, it was filmed in Minnesota, and named after a fictional Minnesota university, but it was basically an Iowa show. Creator Barry Kemp was a proud University of Iowa alum, and he packed the series with tributes to his alma mater from the very beginning, starting with the main character's name. Hayden Fox was borrowed directly from legendary Iowa football coach Hayden Fry. Kemp always maintained that the character wasn't a direct copy of Fry, he just liked the name. Sure, the guy named his fictional coach after a real coach and insisted that it wasn't about the coach, but the Iowa influence didn't stop at the credits. Despite the show's Minnesota setting, the campus exterior shots were filmed at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. Real landmarks like the Iowa Memorial Union, Hillcrest Dormitory, and Kinnick Stadium were all quietly doing double duty as Minnesota State. The fictional school even borrowed its purple and gold color scheme from Minnesota State University in Mankato, the same colors worn by the Minnesota Vikings, which at least kept the Minnesota illusion perfectly intact. And the show's marching band theme song, that wasn't recorded by a studio orchestra. It was performed by the Iowa State University Cyclone Football Varsity Marching Band, which means Iowa's fingerprints are on this show's music too. And there's a trophy involved, but that story's coming up. The show told you it was Minnesota, but every single creative decision said Iowa. Number 6, the night the cast stepped out of character. The Coach series finale, Leaving Orlando, wrapped up Hayden Fox's story the way that most sitcoms do. A quiet, reflective ending with the characters heading toward whatever comes next. Perfectly respectable, totally conventional. Then, the set opened up. The cameras pulled back, the studio audience came into frame, and the cast stepped out of character entirely. Craig T. Nelson, Jerry Van Dyke, Bill Fagerbakke, and Shelley Fabares were suddenly just themselves, standing on a soundstage, looking directly at the people who watched them for 9 seasons. And they said, thank you.
And we wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for watching the 9 years of Coach and letting us do something that we truly truly love.
That moment wasn't in the early drafts. It was added later, specifically to acknowledge the show's run and the audience that stuck with it from shaky first season bubble show all the way to an episode farewell. Jerry Van Dyke, because he couldn't help himself under any circumstances, refused to play it straight even then. He leaned into the bit and acted genuinely confused about why everyone was saying goodbye, joking that he fully intended to show up for work the following morning. The studio crowd reportedly got emotional anyway. Number 5, Van Dyke had to hide out to get the gig. Jerry Van Dyke was notoriously terrible at auditions.
Yeah, I guess I can get...
Oh, Luther, come on.
I'll do it. This is gonna make people cry. You shouldn't be giving pep talks anyway.
Putting him in a room with ABC suits was a gamble that Barry Kemp wasn't willing to take. So he made sure that the room never happened. When the sitcom pushed for an audition, Kemp told them that Van Dyke was unavailable, out on a months-long tour opening for Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet. Very professional, very plausible, and completely made up. Instead, he quietly slipped the network a tape of Van Dyke's guest spot on his other show, Coming of Age. ABC watched it, they loved it, and approved the casting without ever meeting the man in person. There was only one problem. If anyone at the network spotted Van Dyke wandering around Los Angeles, the whole story unraveled instantly. So Kemp reportedly told him to disappear to his ranch in Arkansas and stay out of sight until filming started. So Van Dyke hid, the lie held, and Luther Van Dam made it onto the Screaming Eagles coaching staff.
Team's in the locker room.
I don't care.
I know that. I knew that. I just want you to know they're counting 11 like you...
Without ever sitting across from a single network executive. Number 4, the Newhart crossover nobody expected. Newhart was an 80s CBS sitcom, also created by Barry Kemp, about a Vermont innkeeper perpetually surrounded by the most eccentric neighbors in television history. And 3 of those neighbors were Larry, Daryl, and Daryl.
Hi, I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl.
A trio of backwoods brothers who communicated mostly just through Larry, since the Daryls rarely spoke. Beloved characters, completely unhinged energy. So, naturally, they showed up in Coach. In a crossover that required absolutely zero prior warning, Larry, Daryl, and Daryl, played by William Sanderson, Tony Pappenfuss, and John Voldstad, turned up inside Hayden Fox's cabin like they owned the place. The in-show explanation was that they'd been house-sitting while Hayden's family was away. Sure, fine. No further questions.
Welcome to our humble chapeau.
What do you mean your chapeau? This is my chapeau.
This is our chapeau.
The real reason was simpler. Both shows came from the same creator, and the cameo was Kemp's quiet wink to anyone paying close enough attention to connect the dots. He later admitted that he didn't lose sleep over the logic, which does track, considering the Newhart finale famously revealed that the entire show had been a dream. So if you want to pull that thread all the way, those 3 characters technically wandered out of someone's subconscious and straight into Hayden Fox's living room. Okay, Coach accidentally made a shared universe joke years before that was anyone's whole business model. Number 3, the theme song that turned into a real marching band competition. The Coach opening theme had one job: sound like college football Saturday. Composer John Morris delivered exactly that. Big brass, pounding drums, the kind of music that made you reach for stadium nachos before the first scene even started. It worked so well that the producers decided to take it further. In 1993, ABC launched a national contest inviting college marching bands across the country to record their own versions of the Coach theme. Dozens of schools entered. We're talking real campuses, real bands, real school pride on the line, all for a sitcom opening credits sequence. And the winner? Yep, Iowa State University. That music viewers heard every week had a trophy attached to it. The show also used footage of real college bands for game day shots, weaving real college traditions into the fictional world of the Minnesota State Screaming Eagles, a sitcom theme song that launched a legitimate intercollegiate competition. Somewhere in Ames, Iowa, a marching band director still has the bragging rights to prove it. Number 2, Christine's family was actually her family. On most sitcoms, when a character's mother shows up, it's just a casting call. On Coach, Shelley Fabares took a different approach and brought in her actual aunt. Nanette Fabray, a Tony winner, Emmy winner, played Eleanor Armstrong, Christine's mother.
But I did not come all the way from Kentucky to be talked to like this. Excuse me.
Oh, Mother.
Oh, wait, sir, please, wait.
The warm, effortless chemistry between them in those scenes had a pretty simple explanation. Off camera, Fabray had been close with Fabray for years and was one of the people who encouraged her to pursue acting in the first place. The mother-daughter dynamic felt real. It was, at least partially. Then, Fabray's husband showed up. Mike Farrell, best known as BJ Honeycutt of MASH, guest starred in the Season 2 episode A Jerk at the Opera, playing Jerry, one of Christine's old boyfriends. And let's just say that Coach handled that reunion in the most Coach way possible. Farrell brought the usual easy likability to the role.
They're like $300. But it's for a good cause. Have you been to the opera lately?
No, not in a while.
Which made the whole situation appropriately uncomfortable for Hayden. And in a detail that makes the MASH connection feel less like a coincidence and more like a theme, Harry Morgan, Colonel Potter himself, also guest starred in the series. For Shelley Fabares, chunks of the Coach production schedule were essentially a Hollywood family reunion, with a studio audience, craft services, and a football coach slowly losing his mind in the background. Number 1, the revival episode almost nobody has ever seen. In 2015, NBC decided that it was time to dust off Hayden Fox and bring Coach back from retirement. A full 13-episode revival order, Craig T. Nelson was back. Bill Fagerbakke was returning as Dauber, Pam Stone was set to reprise Judy Watkins. And for a hot second, it genuinely looked like the whole gang was getting the band back together. They filmed the pilot, NBC watched the pilot, and then NBC canceled the entire revival. The official reason was creative differences. TV's politest way of saying something went very, very wrong in that screening room. Dead by August 2015 before a single episode ever made it to air. And here's where it gets strange. The pilot was never released. It wasn't aired, it wasn't leaked, not quietly buried in a streaming library. It basically became lost media. A Coach episode sitting in a studio archive that almost nobody outside of the production crew has ever seen. No screener copies are floating around the internet, no grainy bootleg uploads, nothing. Think about that for a second. In an era where everything gets leaked and everything eventually ends up on someone's YouTube channel, this pilot stayed completely locked away. The cast showed up, the crew showed up, and somebody presumably catered the whole thing, and the only people who ever got to watch it are the ones who made it. 13 episodes ordered, 1 pilot filmed, 0 viewers. Hayden Fox called a play that never made it off the whiteboard, and somewhere in an NBC vault, it's still sitting there. And there you have it, 15 weird and wild facts about Coach. Which one surprised you the most? Well, drop it in the comments and share this with a friend who spent their Tuesday nights with Hader, Luther, and Dauber. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Until next time, this is Remember When.